Hi everyone, I've got something a little bit different here today. I am going to colour in the Creatures of Ken Matsuda, which you've seen me colour in many times before. Hatchette Heroes is the version, the French version. And I've used a lot of water-based media in this book because I think it suits Ken's drawing style. And today I'm actually going to see if I can colour a whole page using Languo gel pens. Now, I've been playing with these a little bit, so I have some various bits of footage that I'm going to put together, so it might be a little bit disjointed, but bear with me. The Languo gel pens come in the various sets of 9. So you can get something like this one, which is Colour of Skin. You can get some that are called Mirandy, and I've got these marked because I have doubles of 2 sets of these. So I've got one set put away and using the other set. And, you know, they might come in a curated set of colours like that, or it might be all one colour like green or blue or pink or whatever. So they come in all these different sets of 9, and there's some beautiful colours. I really like the quality of the pen in terms of how they dry when you're using them as a gel pen. They dry almost like a acrylic paint type opaque effect. I hope I'm all in camera here. And so I really enjoy that, and I've been using them for the really detailed pages and wallpaper pages and stuff like that. However, while I was playing with them, I thought I'd have a go with the water brush and really liked what I was seeing. So what I'm going to do is I've got a few colours out from different sets, and this set, I don't know the correct pronunciation of it. It's maybe Maillard, something like that. And I looked it up because I was interested to find out what the word meant. And the Mirandy sets are based on an artist called Mirandy who used a particular palette of colours, and that's what they've used the name Mirandy for. But this word actually means the process of when you're cooking food and it browns. And so some of these are from this set, others aren't. So the pens actually have the name of the set on them, pardon me, and each set has a code number. So that's how you can tell what set that they come from. So let's just put the Mirandy ones aside for a moment. So yes, this particular set here, the word relates to the process. It's a chemical process, I think, of when food is cooking and it browns. So that's what those colours refer to. So I don't know, I just found that interesting. You may not, but anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to see if I can colour a full page using these little tiny 0.6mm nibs. And I'm going to see if I can colour a whole page using these pens. So I'm just looking here. I've got a little piece of blue tack here. So the end of the pen has a hole in it. I've seen some people pull that out to put the blue tack on, but I found it works just as effectively by just forcing it over that end. What it does is blocks the airflow, and I'm guessing creates a little bit of pressure in here and pushes the ink through the pen that little bit faster and heavier, I guess, for want of a better word. So what I thought I might do here is I'm going to do a series of clips, and it may not be a full colour along, but I want to show you colouring a whole page in these pens. Now, I already got started before I got to the idea of actually recording this. So I have got some colour on my page already. I've got a really cheap, no name, you know, no brand water brush, and it has a really good flow on this water brush. I don't have to squeeze it, and it, you know, quite a substantial amount of water comes out of it. And I've been practicing with this water brush and the Languo pens, and I'm loving using them with water. Now, quite often when I use things with different techniques or different methods to what they are generally marketed as, or what they were designed to do, I guess, I have had people ask me, well, why bother doing that? You know, if you want to use watercolour, just use watercolour. If you want to use a pencil, use a pencil. But that's very true. There's an element of challenge and playing that I like to getting a new product like this. This is not a new product, but it's a new product to me personally. I've only had these for maybe a month or so, and I haven't used them a great deal other than using them on wallpaper pages and for mandala-like images, and maybe for some little small details. But when I get something like this, I like to play with them and just see how much I can push them to do. And also I like to see when a product can be used in many different ways, other than their initial purpose. And if they work easily to create these other effects, I like it, because it means that, you know, you can just pack one packet of pens, especially if you're traveling, and you can have just that one packet of pens, and you can suit many different purposes, you know, without having to overload yourself with supplies. And I'm also always thinking, especially these days, with money being tight for a lot of people, and also it's not always easy to get supplies in different places around the world. But if you're on a budget and you can only afford to buy a few things, I'm just going to start working into some of these areas with green as well, because I've already got some green down here for him. So I'm going to try and mix a couple of colours together and see how that works. And I'm still playing about with the techniques here, so bear with me. But I'm very, very interested in looking at what we can do in terms of multi-purpose supplies and so on when it comes to budget related, because there's been a lot of talk recently on YouTube. There's been a few people doing these opinion videos, or what do they call them? Is it reaction videos or opinion videos or something like that, where they get a bunch of clips from usually TikTok and maybe make a video sharing their viewpoint, their opinion about what they're seeing from, you know, these people. And there's been a lot of talk recently about overconsumption, and TikTok is encouraging like the book community to overpurchase, and in the same vein, some people have been talking about the colouring book community. Other people have mentioned, general hobbies, that TikTok is ruining it for people because this overconsumption is taking over and creating, shortages of different supplies, and people are going crazy buying ridiculous amounts of stuff, and that sort of thing. That's been the general tone of it. And I've got really mixed feelings about it all. I don't really want to go into it too deeply myself. I have my own personal views, but, there has been some talk about whether people in the colouring community should be using artist grade materials in colouring books, or whether it's a waste. And things along those sorts of lines. But I'm looking at it more so from the point of view that there are many of us who are on limited budgets, and we would love to be using the top-end supplies of everything if we could. And there's absolutely no judgment on my part, by the way. If people have the money spare and they can afford to buy those artist grade materials, those top end materials, then all power to them. Go ahead, do it. Like, I have absolutely no judgment on that. That's not my place to judge how other people spend their money. But what I am thinking about here with this particular idea especially is that if you have a limited budget and you still want to have fun, you still want to enjoy your colouring, and you want to be creating the best pages that you can achieve that with budget supplies. You can achieve it with student grade supplies. You may have to work a little bit harder at it. Whoops. But it can be done. You can do it. You don't have to be precluded from colouring or art if you're on a limited budget. There are ways and means around doing some of these things, So what I was thinking when I was playing with these things earlier was that, this is a very, very budget-friendly supply. I can't remember the exact amounts that I paid for these pens, but I bought them off of Temu, and they were very cheap. And I got a lot of different sets. From what I can see, there's very little duplicates of colour. There's some, but there's not a great deal of duplicate of colour. And the quality of them is very nice. And if I can get more than one use out of these pens, like, one sort of technique out of them, and I can create a few different techniques and a few different looks with this budget priced art supply, I am more than happy. And I'm more than happy to share it with you all as well, and give you some tips on ways that you can achieve the same look or the same thing with what you've got. Now, I have worked with gel pens, diluting them with water in the past, so I've had mixed results. So the Sakura Jelly Rolls are certainly not what I would term a budget gel pen, but the Sakura Jelly Roll do this as well. And I've also worked with some cheap budget, no-name sort of gel pens that I've picked up in dollar store type stores, or discount department stores, and they have worked with mixed results. So some have worked better than others. So all I can say is if you've got gel pens, have a play with them, and maybe test them in a sketchbook or a bit of scrap paper or something before you commit to one of your favourite pages in a colouring book, just in case there's any problem. But I haven't experienced any that have diluted to the extent that these particular ones are. These are blending out and diluting exceptionally well. I am really surprised at how well these are actually diluting. And what I'm finding is that I'm just colouring a small area, and then I'm using the water to blend it out. So that's kind of how I work with most things. So I'm see how far that is blending. You know, that colour has gone a long way, but I did a very, very quick little test on a scrap piece of paper, and this is really thin copy paper. And I tried working on them like straight away. So not letting the pen dry and putting the water on, and then I let these ones dry completely and they still moved a little bit. So it's varying results, and again that will be partly because of the paper. So I encourage you to always do your little tests before you commit to your colouring books, and I'm really happy with the way that this is working. Very, very happy and very pleasantly surprised. So when I saw it, I just thought, you know what, this might make a fun video to see whether I can actually complete a whole page with those tiny little 0.6 nibs. Because generally a nib size like that, you would say, you know, don't bother with big areas colouring such a small nib. It's craziness. But working this way is making it a lot easier, you know, very much easier. So what I'm finding is the pens on their own, if you worked on them normally and let it dry, it's quite opaque and it's covering the black ink of the paper. It obliterates some details completely. But using them this way and diluting them and blending them out, it doesn't completely cover all of those detail lines. So that is a plus for me, because I do like to see those lines coming through sometimes. However, if you do like covering your black lines, what you could do potentially is colour with the pen as usual, blend it out, let it dry completely, and then come back and cover those black lines with a gel pen. Whether it's the same one or a different colour is entirely up to you, of course, but that's what I, would recommend. Personally, I like a lot of the black lines from colouring books. I prefer to have them still showing through. It's a personal preference thing, but I'm always happy to have those black lines showing through sometimes. And in fact, when they are covered up, when I've accidentally covered them up sometimes, I actually don't like the way it looks, and that's just very much a personal opinion. But the potential here as using this as a art medium in its own right is huge. Now, would I say, create a wonderful masterpiece and artwork and expect it to be light fast and all of those other things? No, it's not going to be something that you can rely on to be light, fast and so on. But for a colouring book that you're going to keep closed up on a shelf, it's going to be fine. You know, it's going to serve its purpose. And I just think for the price of them, I wish I could remember how much I paid for them, but I can't. But I know they were cheap. For the price of them and what the potential uses of them, I think it makes them great value for money. And in this day and age, with money being tight for many of us, I'm always happy to find something that I can say that about. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let all of that dry, and I'm going to start maybe a few mushrooms here just to get a feel for some different colours, and let's see what we can start achieving. And if you find that the ink flow is a bit scratchy or too slow or too fine, give this little idea a go. It's just, you know, plug up that hole with something, whether it be blue tack. The cap works, but not to the same extent. This is quite yellow. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a colour I want, so I'm just going to blend that out. So I think it's also useful to know that the potential for these acrylic pens to dilute and run even when you don't want them to. So by that I mean, if you've coloured a page with them and at a later stage you come back with, you know, a water-based marker or a watercolour pen or something, and you intend to put some water near them, just be careful in case it does move, because as I say, on that test piece of paper there, I let them dry and then used the water and they still moved. So I had assumed that once they were fully dry that they would be waterproof. And again, I don't know whether it's just the paper that I tried it on or whether they do just keep moving. I will have to do some tests on that for myself. Maybe I'll have to get out a book where I've coloured with them and see if I can test it on a little bit of the page. But I think it's safe to just keep that in mind, that they've got that potential to move. So if you've spent time colouring a great page and you've used these pens on it, and then you come back with water near it at a later stage, just be aware that, you know, that could potentially happen. So I have been on a different page having a go at working back into damp paper with the gel pen, and it does kind of bleed out a little bit and blend a little bit as well. So make sure that you have a go with all different ways that you can think of to dilute the pens or work with the pens, because you may think of some ideas that I haven't thought of yet. I think as time goes on, maybe I will come up with some other ideas as well, perhaps. Who knows? So I'm going to let that dry now, and let's go to, I'm thinking that this is a shell, that this little guy is emerging out of the shell and he's got all these things around him. So I was thinking that I want this sort of greyed colour that we've got up here. I'm just going to put this bit of blue tack on the end. I want the ink to come out nice and runny. So as I said, this is blue tack, but it's white. You can try with the cap on. I've seen somebody, I think it's Dusty Colouring, use a bit of Sculpey clay. You know, that sort of mouldable clay that you can then put in the oven and make hard. So anything that you can think of that can plug up that end of the pen and create a bit of pressure can be used to block it up. So here I'm just working at it a little bit. I want to get rid of all those pen strokes and lines that were in there. And again, it's sort of the same concept with watercolour in the sense that I'm thinking that I will work from lighter to darker when I'm layering some of these colours. So that's still scratchy, and you can take it off and sort of redo it if you feel like it's not coming out fast enough. You know, just manipulate it a little bit, and then I find that sometimes it floods out. It's so thick that it floods out. So I'm just doing these little sections at a time. And I find that there's some really nice colours in these gel pens. Some very subtle colours, and there's some very nice vibrant colours. There's a bit of everything. So you can go onto Temu, or I think probably places like AliExpress may sell them cheaper than what Amazon do. And I think you can buy individual sets as well as, you know, doing a job lot of the whole lot like I did. But if you don't want that many pens, and that's fair enough because it is a ridiculous amount of pens, most of them do have names to the sets that are pretty straightforward, but if you get a bit confused by the term Morandi, or you see some that are named Morandi, there's several different sets with that name, but basically they're muted colours that almost have a grey undertone to some of them, because that's what the painter Morandi tended to favour. But you get others that are, you know, yellow or reddish yellow or skin tone, so they're sort of self-explanatory what you're going to get. So I'm quite liking the colours so far. I think I want to keep it sort of quite naturalistic, this one. I will bring some bright colours into the fish. I'm not sure what I want to do with the fungi or mushrooms. I think we'll keep those you know, quite natural colours as well. I'm not going to go for red mushrooms this time. I have a tendency when I see mushrooms to want to paint them red. So working this way, you have the ability to dilute it a little bit or dilute it a lot. So the more you wash it out, the lighter it gets, the more pale and subdued it's going to be. But if you want some really vibrant, strong, saturated colour, then basically just with the damp brush, you're just feathering it out, almost just patting the colour just to blend the hard edges more than anything, and you get that lovely vibrant result there. And remember to keep cleaning your brush off too. I've made the mistake a couple of times where the colour has stayed in the brush and I've gone to do another colour and it's transferred, because some of the colours are very, very vibrant, very pigmented, which is wonderful. It's what you want. And then you can play around with areas of having saturated, very saturated full colour. You can play with blending colours. You can play with overlaying colours, you know, like you would with some of your other water-based products. So think of it in terms of, you know, just about anything you can do with other water-based mediums. Have a go with these pens and see if you can create the same look with these pens, because I think you might be pleasantly surprised at just how much you can do with them. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to have the Languo brand. If you've got other ones that are very similar, have a go with those and see what you can achieve. As I mentioned, I have had a go with Sakura in the past and some others, and I've had mixed results. Some have worked better than others, but I don't think any of them have worked quite as well as what these ones are so far. So I think I might keep going off camera, and I'll come back to you when I'm doing something a little bit different. So I thought that I would just share with you that I got this particular set out to use, which is warm yellow, and I chose this orange colour here to do a fish. Now it doesn't look particularly neon until I put it on the paper, and then I thought, wow, that's, you know, that's a bit in your face for a fish colour. Now I'm not going for realism here, so that's okay. But I thought, wow, that is a, you know, rather vibrant orange. However, when I use the water to brush it out, it becomes much more pleasant and more like I was hoping for. So again, you know, what is the potential use of that? The potential use of it is that if you have used the pen by mistake and you've got it on a page and it's way too vibrant for what you were expecting, then maybe, you know, the use of a water brush and a little bit of water might be enough to tone that down and bring it back more into a line with what you were hoping for. So again, you know, take the information as you find it. If it's useful to you, then that's great, and if it isn't, then you know, it's not for you, that's fine. But it's just a little idea that if your paper can cope with having a bit of water, if you've used it and it's much too vibrant and you want to tone it down that little bit without actually adding any extra things to your page, then maybe try this little bit of water with it to blend that colour out. And so what I'm starting to do also is that idea of overlaying some of that colour for a little bit of a visual blend and a layered, layered look. And I'm going to try and keep, because I'm so excited about it, I just keep fiddling with it, but I'm going to try and keep some areas very lightly blended and very translucent, perhaps transparent, and then I'm going to build up colour in other areas, so hopefully I get a bit of variety going. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little bit carried away. I get excited by what I'm seeing, and so I've got a bit of water keeps dripping out of this one. I get very excited by what I'm seeing, and I just want to, pull out all the stops and keep trying all these things, and I forget to pull back a little bit and I overdo it. So just, have to remind myself every now and again that everything does not have to be at full intensity for it to make a nice picture. And also I think that colour, once it's over the top of the diluted areas, it's a little bit more subtle as well. So sometimes we just need to experiment a bit further till we hit on just that look that we're trying to portray. So what I thought I'd show you here is I've used the pens very scratchy. So I've actually put 4 different colours there onto the page, and it's very scratchy looking, and I'm going to see how they blend together now using the gel pen. The water brush. Oh my goodness, words. So it's a bit of a test, because I haven't actually worked like this before. And I don't know that the colour is going to blend as smoothly as I had hoped it would. But all is not lost, because we can always put more layers of colour on. But I wanted to I'm not sure, is that a crack in the egg? I'm a bit confused with what that is. Anyway, let's get back to the picture. So I'm a little bit unhappy with that, but let's see if I can get some nice juicy ink flowing. I've lost my little bit of blue tack. What did I do with that? Here we go. So let's see if I can get some ink flowing a little bit better out of the pen. And just very, very lightly work over the top of some of these patchy areas where it hasn't blended too well. I don't want to disturb the paper too much. So I don't know if he's emerging out of the egg here. I'm finding this a little bit hard because here I can see scales. I'm not quite sure what this is supposed to be. And I did think maybe it was a leaf over there, but now I'm confused. So I'm just going to gently, very carefully, I'm not pressing too hard with the nib because this paper is wet. I don't want to tear it. I also don't want to force too much colour through the paper onto the other side of the paper either. I just want to try and blend some of those rougher pen strokes that didn't quite blend that well. And you can see they're already softening up. So it is working, but it is disturbing the surface. The other side is printed, so I'm not going to actually see too much of that go through. But that is gently blending together. Okay, so we'll leave that alone. Still really not sure what that is. You're probably all shouting at me, but I've got no idea what it is. What else can I try with you here on camera? Oh, that's what I was going to show you. There is a set that is called Highlight. It's got 3 gold, 3 silver and 3 white in it. So I did just want to try the white. If I can just move this down a little bit. A bit precarious with the setup here, but I've zoomed you in a little bit. So up here I have already tried a little bit, but we'll see whether I can re-establish some highlights easily with the white. Over the coloured areas. So again, if that's not flowing to your liking, just keep pushing on the end and manipulating. Sometimes I find if you take it off completely, push that back in, plug it up, that the ink will then start to come out a little bit more freely. So I'm just trying to think of where I might want some highlight to show you without putting my hand in something that I've already done. Oh, see, that's how it can come flooding out. Let's use some of that over here and see if we can get some variation going. But that's probably a good example of showing you just how much it can flood out. Yeah, gotta be careful of that. And what maybe I can do with the just slightly damp water brush is soften up the hard edges and blend that a little bit so that it's not so obvious. So yeah, that was a perfect example of showing you just how much, if you just plug it up completely and get that air pressure happening, it makes the ink flood out. But again, anywhere where it's a little bit too obvious, just use a damp brush to dab at it and you can pick some of that colour back off. So I'm quite happy with the way that works actually. That's rather effective. Just lift any excess off with that brush, clean brush. So there you go, that's something else to think about. So the light is fading really fast now, it's getting later in the day, but I just thought I'd show you here on this bit at the bottom. It's to me it looks like some sort of moss or lichen or some sort of organic matter growing, and instead of blending it all out completely, I'm just going to use the gel pen quite thickly, and I'm just using little scribbling motions, and I thought that might be an interesting texture to introduce into some of the foliage areas. So hopefully I've got all of this on camera because I've zoomed in a little bit here just to show you how I might approach a little bit of texture and different look. So this is probably what's going to come at the end more than anything. So when everything's completely dry, coming back over these areas, trying to bring in a little bit of, texture and definition and so on into there again. And then just to show you a little bit more closely again, some of this ink is flowing a lot more quickly now. I've got that blue tack really jammed into the end, and I've already done this area once, but I'm just going to build the colour up a little bit again, and just with that water brush, you don't necessarily have to dilute it with lots of water either. You can work at building up the colour, building up the texture, and just patting the edges off to soften those hard edges. And really that's all you need to do. And in that darker area, maybe I can start to introduce a bit of a darker brown perhaps into some of those areas that have got the hatching effect, and just start to bring in different textures and different colours and so on. And you might be able to tell that I've got quite a frayed old brush that I'm using here with this. But sometimes there's always an inclination to want to get new things. So, you know, our brushes are starting to get a bit old, so we want new ones and so on. But sometimes the frayed brushes or the old stuff can actually create some nice texture or different effects. So, you know, don't always be in a rush to discount some of your older stuff. You know, want to be replacing it for new all the time, because sometimes, you know, we can make use of different things, random things that, you know, might be deemed as junk. But when it comes to your art practice or your colouring practice or techniques, sometimes these random things can be really useful. You know, like I'm thinking about old frayed toothbrushes or old frayed paintbrushes or stuff, you know, they all create different effects. You know, I'm thinking about how, I'm just going to get a slightly different sort of brown here and see what we can do with a different brown as well. I'm thinking about, you know, sometimes people that paint, they'll use things like old credit cards to apply paint. You know, completely random stuff that you don't necessarily think has a use, and you might think, oh, I need to go out and buy that plastic spatula that's on sale, you know, because somebody's using it and it's, you know, marketed as being something that you need to achieve that look. But, you know, think about the stuff that you've got around your home already that might do the same thing. Going to build up a little bit more of this where it's nice and thick now. It's coming out rather thickly. And not all of it will be, you know, potentially blended. And then up here, is this going to be on camera? I hope so. So generally keeping the, you know, pen upright will get a better flow as well. When you put it off to the side like this, it's not necessarily going to work that great, but I'm just wiping all that excess off of that nib. In fact, I should do that off to the side here under some paper towel. And then I don't want all of it to be perfectly blended. I want a little bit of texture starting to come into play in different areas now as well. So I'm going to have to call it quits for today. The light is starting to get really bad in here. And that's even bleeding a little bit like watercolour does. you can really play around with this sort of interplay between really opaque colour and very heavily diluted watery type effects as well. And also I'm going to keep playing with this you know, light and then dark, and then here maybe experiment a little bit with the, can I use the lighter colour over the top of the diluted brown and get some different, you know, textures and effects happening. So I hope that light isn't getting too bad there and you can see what I'm doing, and I am definitely calling it quits now for today. So I will be back with some more. It's the next day now and I have decided to speed up some of this footage and do a voiceover. There will be a series of clips now that I put together. Some will be in real time and some is sped up footage. It's pretty much applying the pens in the same way that you've seen me done so far. So I just thought for time's sake I'll speed it up for you. I want you to see that I am actually doing the full page in the gel pens, and I haven't brought any other sort of medium into play with this page at all, other than some fine liner towards the end. I've started on this side of the page at the top and I'm working towards the bottom. I'm hoping that by the time I get to the bottom, these earlier sections at the top will be dry. What I'm finding with these gel pens is that definitely when I've added water, I do need to wait for it to dry, obviously. But even using the gel pen as a regular pen, the ink can be quite juicy and wet, and you do need to wait for it to dry thoroughly before putting your hand over the top of it because it will smudge. I want to introduce a bit more of these oranges and tans down this part of the composition because I have an awful lot of green on the alligator. And I know that I've picked a stereotypical green alligator, which is almost cartoon-like, but that's what came into my head when I first started colouring. And I am aware that real alligators do have much murkier colour schemes, and they have a lot of grey and brown and so on them, but I've gone with green. So because there is so much green for the alligator, and this is a very complex, detailed drawing, I felt that I needed to use something other than green for the foliage here because it just is very busy and can be tricky to work some of the details out. I felt that even if I had different variations of green, that it was still going to be difficult to work out where the alligator ended and where the foliage began. So I've gone for browns, golds and the oranges to just get some difference happening there and make it easier for the viewer's eye to work out where the alligator actually does end and what is foliage. Also, that sort of pinky red there just gave a little pop of something different. It is looking all very much the same sort of flat look at the moment. There's no real changes in tone and drama happening. So just that little touch of pinky red did help to lift this area a little bit and make it just look a little bit different. So apart from that pinky red, The colours are all very much the same as what I had out from the previous colouring session. So no more new colours have been brought out. It's what has already been used on the rest of the page. And I'm getting loath to add too many extra colours at this point in the colouring because it is so busy. I don't want it to get too confusing. And so I'm just trying to use what I already have out on the table there, easy to hand. So with this particular part of the foliage, I decided to go for a mint green because it was completely different to everything else on the page. And I thought that it would allow me to make the leaves look like they were variegated leaves. So Ken had drawn them with little details on there, little striations or little stripes, which reminded me of variegated plants that you get where there are, two tones. So, it might be a lighter leaf with a darker pattern or striation on it. So that's what I decided to go for. It also allowed me to suggest that that bit of foliage there was the very uppermost part closest to the viewer's eye, so that the alligator receded behind it and that came forward. So even though it was green, it was enough of a difference and light enough that it helped to really bring that bit of foliage right to the forefront. Now I start to think about darkening some areas and bringing darker tones in so that I can get a little bit of drama happening and describe areas better that are in shadow or in shade. So this particular part here had confused me. I thought it was a leaf for a while, and it ends up being that it's the shell peeling back on itself. So I needed to darken under there and describe what was happening a little bit better. And I used a little bit of dark blue there on the left-hand side, but decided I didn't really want to introduce another colour into it. So I end up using the black mostly, and I just feather it out with a bit of water to make it look more like charcoal rather than solid black in some of the areas. With the fish, I decided to keep them all the same sort of colour. I've introduced some of that pinkish red there into these little fish just so that they're a little bit different. But I wanted them to be very similar so that when you looked at one fish and you saw that colour on the others, straight away you'd realise that they are all fish. It's really very detailed and busy through that middle section of the composition. And I found it tricky to work out what some of the details were while it was uncoloured. So I tried to simplify it when I was colouring it to keep the groups of colour together, hopefully so that it reads a little bit easier when the viewer's looking at it, or when I come to look at it again through the book later. It's going to be much easier to see what's going on, that colour represents the fish. So I'm just using the yellow over the top of the orange. So working on the damp paper is okay, but you need to be careful to keep a light touch, of course. You don't want to disturb the surface of the paper too much. But I'm just playing around there with the different techniques of working into the different colours while the ink is still wet, or whether it's got water on and that helps it bleed. And I apologise for being off camera here at the top section. I didn't realise that so much was off camera, but I'm starting to bring some details in. So areas where I know that I'm not going to be doing more washes of lots of water, I'm starting to put the details back in. Now they really do need to be the last thing that you do. If you're planning any more watery washes around it, it's not ideal because it could bleed out again. So what I'm trying to do is, as each area is getting more and more resolved as I go on, I'm working around the picture in what looks to be quite disjointed manner, but what I'm doing is waiting for the paper to dry or the ink to dry sometimes, and I don't want to work over it, so I am jumping around the picture, but I'm not putting those details back in until I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to do any more washes of colour. So on this side with the spikes on the alligator's tail, again, I'm just trying to darken up some of those details. So again, using all of Ken's line work, and I'm not really adding anything to it other than darkening up his line work. In this section, I'm actually adding some of the mustardy gold, sort of yellowy colours into the alligator's skin. Now, theoretically, they would not be there, but what I'm doing is I'm bringing in the colour from around the composition back into these areas to break up that intense greenery. It all was a bit too much green, and I don't think it really helped to describe what was going on very well. But adding those little touches of yellow as a highlight instead of just white as a highlight helped to bring in the other elements of the picture. It just broke up all that sort of solid greenness that was there and lightened that area up a little bit in a really pleasant way. So sometimes with colouring pages, we don't necessarily have to be looking for full realism, but what we're doing is trying to make a pleasing image to look at. And sometimes that means using unrealistic colours or colours that would not really be there in real life, but using them in a way that it helps to lift the picture, make it pleasant to look at, and help to read what's going on with all the details without introducing too many new colours into it. So start to bring in some of the edges maybe, because I don't think I want to keep putting more and more water on these areas specifically. I think they've got enough on them already. And here I'm just using the nib off to the side so that there's barely any sort of ink coming out. It's not too heavy. So I'm just actually going over the lines and marks that Ken has made. I'm not adding in anything else that wasn't already there. I'm kind of replacing some of that stuff that I covered up with the real opaque, heavy cream that I used on the shell here. I covered up that green initial layer that I did once I realised that, yeah, I was looking at the inside of the shell there. So what I'll do here is I'll bring in a little bit of brown on this side to mirror what's on that side, because it looks like it's a continuation of the pattern that you can see here is coming from underneath that overlaid flap. And I'm just going to really carefully pat that and take the hard edges off, but not add too much water. So I want it to blend in with what I've done on that side there. Quite happy with that. And I don't think I will be putting a background on this particular one. I think there's enough going on in the picture that it doesn't really need any sort of background to distract, other than maybe just a flat, you know, colour, plain colour, very simple. But personally, I don't think it needs that. So this here is one part of the fungi. So what I might do is darken that off a little bit because it's behind. And I'm aware that that is the alligator's underbelly, but it really needs pushing back behind all of this stuff that's going on at the front of it. And a hint of that over here. And that is that the black? Yeah, it is. So I'm going to start doing some of the details with the black as well, because I feel like some of these areas I will keep fiddling if I get the opportunity, but once I put these black details on, it's going to be really hard to go around some of these details. So, you know, this has to be the last thing you do, really. It's like putting eyelashes on a portrait and eyebrows and stuff, you know, really that needs to be the last thing you do after you've already established all the values for the skin, because you can't come back and colour around little tiny eyelashes and details like that. So some stuff you just have to leave it for the end, and then once they're done, they're done. You've got to accept that and move on and not keep, you know, playing with it. And I do get guilty of fiddling. I have already mentioned that once I find something new, that an idea that excites me, and particularly if it's like, you know, the gel pen was nice, the ink was real juicy, and it was really satisfying to watch that heavy, thick ink flowing on, that before you know it, you've covered the whole page with that heavy, thick ink, and you maybe, you know, hadn't intended to. Well, that's what I do anyway. And, you know, really when it comes to these visual hobbies like colouring or art, variety really does have a lot of value, and sometimes less is more, but within that I would definitely say that you know, variety of lines, variety of intensity, variety of tone, because you can work with one colour, just, you know, one colour. You could have a graphite or lead pencil, or you could have a, you know, a sepia brown pencil and nothing else, and you can come up with something brilliant just by varying your tone, your lines, your technique, having little visual clues, a bit of variety, and yet that one colour, that one pen or one pencil, can achieve an awful lot. So just working at getting that little bit of drama, that little bit of intensity happening. So I've got these Ohuhu fine line drawing pens here, and I'm going to go for a very, very tiny nib. So the smallest one is 0.20 millimeters, and it's called 0.05. And it's the tiniest nib that's in there. And I'm just going to do some of these details here that got lost with that light opaque colour wash over there, lightening some of the lines up. And I won't do all of them, but I'll just do some of them. And also don't forget that it is okay to actually leave some things uncoloured and the white of the paper showing. You don't have to colour every millimetre of the paper either. So as I said, I like to see the black lines. A lot of people don't, so they'd be happy that the lines got covered up, but you don't have to replace all of them, of course. So again, you can be, you know, leaving some lines missing. It's in art they call it lost and found edges. So obviously a found edge, it would be one that's been highlighted or outlined. And a lost edge is when there's nothing outlining and it tends to blend into the background. They call that a lost edge. And sometimes you may have to put in some lines. You might feel that the artist hasn't fully explained something or described something. You may wish to put some of your own lines. There's a bit of a jump in the footage there, but I was just really talking about doing the line work. And as you can see here, I'm just continuing that line work, looking at the areas where I just feel like it's a little bit too hard to read and strengthening up the lines. Again, trying to keep that variation of weight and type of line. So I'm getting really close to the end now. I've cut sections out so it's not too long, but I introduce a pale yellow to put some highlights in. Instead of using white all the time, I'm using a pale yellow for some highlights. And here I'm just doing some final details, trying to remind myself to vary the line work, to not have the same intensity or weight line all the time as well, but kind of match it into what Ken had done with the original drawing. So yeah, I'm at the very end here. These bits of yellow are just, again, thinking about what would be catching little bits of light maybe, and instead of making it a white highlight, I decided to use that very pale yellow with a slight neon tinge to it. It just helps to lift the areas that looked a little bit flat. So now I'm showing you the close-up details at the end. There's a lot of texture there where I have worked over and over and over with layers of ink. I've used water. I've come back in and drawn on top of damp paper and really tried to build that texture up. This is a test piece, of course. It's the first page that I've decided to do the whole page with these Languo gel pens. So it is a kind of a sampler or tester piece, but I'm really happy with the way that it's worked. I like those bits of texture showing. I've, you know, tried to remind myself not to over blend everything, that it is okay to leave marks, it's okay to leave lines, and it's all right to have texture in a drawing. So you can see those things when they're very close up to the camera, but when they're further away, and when you're looking at it like you would be looking at it in real life, you don't necessarily see all those little dots and dabs. You don't see all those little details, but they do add up to have an impact. And from a distance, it does still help to tell the story, even though you're not seeing every little tiny minute detail. It does add to the picture, I feel. You can see that there are bits that I've left white. I haven't coloured every you know, centimetre of the paper. I have left some areas white for the natural paper to show through. I think that's perfectly okay to do that on a colouring page as well. So there you go, that's a look at the page. I did have a few smudges there that I've been able to remove some of those with an eraser, so I was quite happy about that. I really like the way this page has turned out. I think I will definitely be using these pens in this way again. I'm not just going to use them for repetitive patterns and mandalas. I think I've found a way that I'm happy to use them. I won't necessarily do it every page, but I think it's going to be really nice to work with these pens in this manner from time to time. I certainly do like the colour range. It could do with a bit more range of greys, but I'll have a look and see whether they do sell a grey pack maybe. But I don't know, I managed okay with this without the greys anyway. So yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed seeing this. I've enjoyed working on it. If you've watched to the end here, I really do appreciate you sticking with me and watching it to the end. And I hope that if you have Languo gel pens or any other sort of gel pens in your collection, that this might inspire you to have a play and think about different ways that you can work with your supplies. Take care, everyone. I hope you enjoy your colouring time. Bye now.